All right. Happy New Year, everyone. It's our first webinar of 2026. Hope you had a great holiday season. We're glad to have you back with us for another wonderful year of Green Builder Media content. We start off this year by celebrating International Kite Day. Now, you might be wondering why I'm mentioning that. And if you are, don't worry, our audiences often do. But there's always a reason. As legend goes, Benjamin Franklin was unsafely flying his kite in a storm, and when it got zapped by lightning, he learned what he needed to learn about electricity, and hence the light bulb was born. Now, we've come a long way since Franklin's perilous kite adventures, but we are going to talk about energy and specifically distributed energy resources. These also go by the name virtual power plants. Back with us is Darren Waschek, who is the president of Learning Edge LLC, a firm that specializes in residential energy efficiency training and building science consulting. Darren was a key implementer of the EPA's Energy Star for Homes program for more than 20 years. He has helped solve warranty issues for hundreds of homes and trained thousands of individuals on the basics of building science, energy efficiency for buildings, energy efficiency programs, and the IECC. He holds a bachelor's degree in construction and master's and doctoral degrees in public administration and policy from Arizona State University. Speaking of electricity, we have an electric partner in NV Energy, and they want you to know about their incredible benefit called PowerShift. It helps residential and business customers conserve energy and save money on their power bills. PowerShift is a one-stop resource to find energy-efficient products and services. For more information, check it out at nvenergy.com/PowerShift. And during the course of today's presentation, you can submit questions for Darren. Simply use the Q&A box located at the bottom of the Zoom window. I'll review those questions and pose them to Darren after his presentation. Darren, welcome back.
Thanks so much, Mike. I appreciate the introduction. And two comments on your introduction. First of all,
Yeah.
your story about Benjamin Franklin. In my one of my classes that I teach on energy efficiency products, I talk about batteries, and Benjamin Franklin's the one that created the battery. In fact, he's the one that coined the name. I'm not sure if you're aware of that.
No.
He took a bunch of Leyden jars, put them together, and it looked like a battery of troops as they were
Right.
lined up. And that's where the name battery came from. And I share that in one of my other classes. And by the way, the NV Energy program as our sponsor, that program happens to be part of and part and parcel to what we're going to talk about today when it comes to virtual power plants. So the things that we'll talk about actually is what NV Energy is doing in Nevada. So we're supporting your sponsor very directly today in our presentation. I'm sure, yeah, thumbs up for that and making
Awesome.
sure those guys are happy. So, and so thank you everybody for being here today. And I especially want to thank Green Builder Media for allowing me to share yet another one of my webinars that I offer to my audience and being able to share that wider with the Green Builder Media audience. So I'm very excited to do that today. Today's class being Shared Energy Solutions with Virtual Power Plants. It's not my newest class, it's my second newest class. Today you will learn what that newest class is because it's actually a complement to this one. I want to start off by thanking Green Builder Media for hosting today's class and also as a sponsor. And then to one of my sponsors that sponsors my classes, Salt River Project, an electric utility here in the Arizona marketplace. And I'm grateful for their sponsorship as well. I have a lot to cover today, but I told Mike that I was aiming for 60 minutes. So that's my goal. And I might talk a little fast to make sure that we get close to that time frame, so you guys are within that time slot. We're going to start off talking about setting the stage for flexible energy solutions, okay? Which is what virtual power plants and distributed energy resources are all about. Managing the duck curve, critical. If you've probably heard of it, we're going to make sure you guys know what that is. Demand response approaches that the utility companies take, including feedback, behavior, rate response, and direct dispatch. We're going to talk about VPP as virtual power plants as in fact, probably the most cost-effective way for us to solve our energy needs, our energy demand challenges that we have. That I'll tee up at the very beginning, defining those. Then we'll talk about the role that energy efficiency plays in virtual power plants. The two are and distributed energy resources. The two are actually very, very closely tied together and support each other. So we're going to make that very clear because a lot of people are very familiar with energy efficiency, But what relation does it have to virtual power plants? Going to make that clear. And then distributed energy resources, DER, in energy programs, because DERs are in energy programs. You may not have been fully aware of that, but we'll make that clear today. And they're also in the code, the latest version of the code, the IECC 2024. We'll talk about incentives that are provided to builders and developers as part of the distributed energy resources and virtual power plants, and then incentives to homeowners. We'll also talk about that. So we got a lot to cover as we go in, and I want to get started and launch into that. Oh, by the way, everybody will get a copy or have an opportunity to get a copy of the presentation slides that you're going to see today. All the slides you'll have a copy of. You just need to provide a little bit of feedback to me at the very end, and then you guys will be able to download the slides. So keep an eye out for that when we get to the end, but do know you'll get a copy of all of these slides for today. Now, I want to start off by giving you this little cheat sheet. So pull out your phone and take a picture of this screen, because we're going to be using a lot of acronyms today, and I want you to be able to refer back to this so that you understand. Some of them I've been thrown at you, like distributed energy resources, DER, and battery energy storage systems, DERMS, distributed energy resource management systems. EE, most people are good with, energy efficiency, EV, electric vehicle, PV, photovoltaic. Those are the easy ones. And then VPP, virtual power plant. Now, this slide, some of you may have seen before, and that's because I borrowed it from a good friend of mine, Tom Hines with Tierra Solutions. So he talked about virtual power plants a couple years ago. Green Builder Media had him come in, and honestly, I'll tell you, that was the second time I had really learned about virtual power plants, was that webinar 2 years ago. And since then, I've really geeked out about this material because I think it's so powerful and so important to where we're going into the future. And again, that'll be super clear by the time we're done today. But Tom, in that webinar, I thought was tremendous, shared some of the 10 revolutionary energy industry trends that matter from a utility perspective. First of all, historically, climate has been more or less predictable conditions. Okay, I don't know if you can ever consider the weather predictable, but they certainly try, and it's been a little bit more chaotic in current times, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Utility policy. Historically, no carbon policies existed, multiple fuels, and then also monopoly service territories, power grid. What did that look like historically? Centralized energy generation, right? Utilities generated the energy, sent it out to their customers. One-way power flows, right? From the utility to the user at the end. And if you needed more energy, you built more power plants. That was the energy. That was the solution. If you needed more, you just built more. And then we also historically have had a highly reliable grid. And then when we talk about the customer, little to no competition for customers with the monopolies that we had for utilities and still to some extent have. And then consumers were fairly disinterested. Hey, if I flip the switch and the lights go on, that's all I care about. If they don't go on, you're going to hear from me. And so that was really historically the trends that we've seen. Well, if you look at now and into the future, each of these points, we do have more extreme weather events, higher peak demand. And so that's leading to higher peak demand because of the conditions that we've been dealing with. Higher demand in the winter times because of colder winters, higher demand in the summer times because of hotter summer times. From the utility policy perspective, the goal out there is typically decarbonization by 2050. That's a goal that's getting kicked around a lot these days, but it's still out there, and a lot of things have been kind of pointing in that direction. So decarbonization. And then for multiple fuels, huge push in lots and lots of arenas towards electrification. And that is, again, a big by lots of areas of the energy sector. And then we've got, of course, all the deregulation things, FERC 222, CCA, and then the distributed energy resource aggregators. As far as the grid's concerned, centralized energy generation, that's a thing of the past with distributed generation. In particular, we've got generation on individual homes and businesses, right? Solar panels, maybe wind, those types of things. One-way power flow, that's gone because of the generation that is happening at our businesses and our residential properties. And so now we can send energy back into the grid, two-way flows that the utilities have to manage and deal with. And then, as far as managing demand to intermittent supply, that is an alternate or alternatives to what we're talking about building more power plants. We'll definitely get into that more. And then the reliability on the grid is really declining. I'm going to share with you. I usually share quite a few examples of that reliability. I'm going to show you one important one today, just in the interest of time. And then, of course, when it comes to customers, we've got deregulation, we've got distributed energy resources, competition, self-supply. All of these things are changing the world that the utilities have to operate in. And then, of course, savvy users, Tom called them prosumers, right? And that's anybody that's got an internet connection and can surf the web is going to be able to be far more savvy, smart, and a much more proactive consumer when it comes to energy and what they do with energy. Let's talk about that reliability piece for real quick. So this is just one particular data point that came out of a really good publication that talks about a lot of issues that impact the utilities, utility drive. Explosive demand growth puts more than half of North America at risk of blackout. According to the North American Electric Reliability Corporation. So if you look deeper into that article, they describe the situation as effectively utilities doing a lot of retirements of power plants to the tune of 60,000 megawatts of coal capacity by 2029. Now, of course, those of you that are paying attention to the headlines, and especially the power and energy headlines, you know that a lot of power plants, coal power plants, are being not just by the utilities decision, but by the federal government's decision saying, no, you keep running. We need you. That's causing all kinds of other challenges. Some of these power plants were actually set to be closed at the end of last year, and everything had been set up. They were ready to turn the switch off on December 31st. And then a month before that, the current administration said, no, you must keep that thing running, which is causing lots of challenges from logistics to costs and all kinds of things. But nonetheless, there is still this retirement process going on. And at the same time that we've got that retirement, we've got 128 megawatts in rising demand. And that's as of this article, okay, when we talk about demand. The explosive demand is coming from lots of different sectors, right? Data centers, that's huge in the headlines. Building and transportation, electrification, right? Electric vehicles, all electric buildings, and other large commercial and industrial loads, such as manufacturing facilities. And then the hydrogen fuel plants are also requiring energy, although those are also casualties of a lot of things that went away last year, funding that went away last year. So that one might be not quite so bad. But let's talk about data centers here, because that's the big one. That seems to be the biggest one that we're trying to manage. This is a report that came out from Berkeley Labs looking at the total U.S. data center electricity use from 2014 projected out to 2028. And you can see that from 2023 out to 2028, we've got a tripling in consumption just from data centers. This was a forecast that just came out in November of last year, looking at these projections, the 5-year nationwide summer peak growth over the last several years. So originally they had projected it at just under 850 gigawatts. And then they just have each year continued to revise that to our latest up to 166 gigawatts of peak demand in summertime. That this is a moving target that is, again, freaking out everybody, including and especially the utility companies that have to meet this demand because it's hard to even figure out what is that demand when you continue to see these adjustments made over time. And so let's talk about distributed generation, which I've mentioned already, distributed generation. And this is causing the huge challenge that we know as the duck curve, managing the duck curve. So what is the duck curve actually? The duck curve is being caused by all of the solar panels, for example, that are on homes and businesses that are around our communities, around in the metro areas and even in the remote areas, the rural areas, all of those collectively are distributed energy generation. All right. So when you hear of distributed generation, we're talking about basically solar panels. It could be wind. Somebody could have a wind turbine on their property. That would be one. But by and large, we're talking 95, 98% of what we're when we talk about distributed resource, it's really going to be photovoltaics. Over on the left is a picture of what the solar generation looks like during the course of a day. This happens to be July 4th of last summer. And you can see that, obviously as the sun comes up, we generate more and more power until we get to the middle of the day, right at noon in the middle of summertime. And then it goes down, of course, as the sun starts to go down as well. And so that's creating this the left-hand side of that generation curve, that's when all the distributed generation kicks on, all the solar panels. When that happens, effectively, those users, those distributed businesses and homes, they don't need to grab any power from the grid. So yeah, we needed you until the sun came up. As soon as the sun came up, we don't need you anymore utility. So all of a sudden, the demand on the grid takes a nosedive. That's A. And then at the very belly of the duck, what we've got is too much energy production. This is the part. This is the scenario that keeps utility operators up at night, because they've got to figure out what to do with that energy. Oftentimes, they actually have to pay somebody to take that energy. So it's actually an expense to them, not just what do we do with it, because it's generated. And these power plants, the big power plants, they don't turn on and off on a dime like the switch on your lights. They take a while to ramp up, and then they run constantly and continuously. Now they do have what's called peaker plants that will be able to, they'll fire up fairly quickly. But that's another thing that the utilities have to invest in. So there are solutions to this. That's what we're talking about today. And then lastly, of course, when the sun goes down, that's when all of a sudden the demand spikes, and you can see it actually overshoots, because what's happening between 6 and 9 is everybody's home watching TV, cooking their food, and the demand is really going to be high at that end of the day that you can see the head of the duck. So that's the duck curve that you might have heard about, and that's what it's all about. So distributed energy resources, if you look at the clean energy that's being produced worldwide, you can see the PV solar building on buildings has grown significantly in that yellow, the yellow stripe, darker yellow stripe, significantly, especially in 2023, 24, 25. We'll see how that continues with the changes to incentives, but all indications are that the horse has left the barn. Meaning that solar is going to continue to be something that's going to be adopted and implemented in lots of different ways because so much of the market has matured and is moving forward that we may not see quite the magnitude. It might be more of a leveling off instead of a constant increase. But but PV solar is certainly here to stay. And this increase, by the way, is these various stripes from 2012 that continue to lower the belly. The more distributed energy resources, the more distributed photovoltaics we have, that just deepens that belly more and more over time. That's the direct cause of that. Battery storage really is a huge solution. Not the only, but it is a very major solution for dealing with what do we do with all that excess energy in the middle of the day. And so if we looked into the past about the energy storage that has existed from 2018 to 2024, look at that massive increase of batteries, okay? Battery adoption and implementation, basically up and running when it comes to batteries. So that's the past. These are some of the predictions going into the future from Wood Mackenzie. And you can see that these are all upward trends. Worst case scenario is that we might have a little bit of a dip because of the incentives that have been removed. We might consider that middle of the road being probably pretty realistic. And then the best case scenario is going to be that upper line on our chart. But again, solar and batteries, we're seeing an awful lot of that continuing into the future. It's you can't take the horse back in the barn; it's already out, or maybe the genie's out of the bottle. You're not going to stuff the genie back in again. We are moving forward, although that pace may just change a little bit. So. Who's manufacturing all the batteries that we need, by the way? Who's manufacturing these things? Because this is the US lithium ion battery, by and large, the batteries that are being produced for our vehicles and our homes and other purposes. Notice that those that are bringing on the batteries are auto manufacturers, right? Ford, Stellantis, GM. They're the ones that are building the battery plants because they need them for their electric vehicles. And of course, the electric vehicles have been taking their own hit as of the end of tax incentives last year. But all that infrastructure has been built. It might be shelved for a little while because of demand shifts, but they're going to continue to build electric vehicles, maybe not quite at the same pace, and they're still going to need batteries. But and of course, these investments have been made, capital investments by Ford and Stellantis and GM, and of course Tesla being another one that's perhaps obvious in this mix. They've been building their own battery factories, and then those batteries are not just for vehicles, they're also going to be able to be used for utilities. So who's buying the batteries that are being produced besides the ones that the manufacturers, the car auto manufacturers are using for themselves? Front of meter, this is what it looks like. It's the utility companies. They're the ones that are buying these things. So this is Arizona Public Service, one of the large utilities in Arizona. They're building brought online already. They're a huge battery facility, and it's not their last one. Tucson Electric Power, another Arizona utility, they just have built the first of 800 megawatts of battery energy storage systems. And then Salt River Project, the other third large utility and our sponsor for today, they're building several of their own battery storage facilities. And the reason is that they've got to do something with that generation for those power plants in the middle of the day. So they're going to run those power plants, and they're going to use these batteries to manage peak load, but also to have a place to send that energy. So this is what the utilities are doing at the utility level to manage the duck curve, okay? And what about other buyers like you and me, the individual customers? Well, on the left, this is a huge driver. It's the cost of batteries. Okay, the cost of batteries. So it's dropped significantly over the last 15 years, the price of batteries. And of course, this is the other half, and that is how many of the PV systems that are being installed these days are now going to be including batteries as part of that. I just purchased a solar battery system for my own property last year. I'm going to tell you a little bit about that towards the end of class today. But of course, you see battery being added in as a very significant component. I will tell you that when you add battery to a photovoltaic system, the abilities and the power of that combination is incredible. And there do need to be certain incentives around that, not necessarily getting money for doing that, but the utilities providing rate plans and other things that make it so that you can take maximum advantage of having the PV and battery system. But I'll come back to more of that later, okay? Now, the utilities, in order to manage demand, the duck curve and everything else that goes into their world, they've created basically three different approaches. How can we modify behavior through feedback? They also will do a rate response type of a mechanism. And then lastly, direct dispatch, which is where distributed energy resources and virtual power plants come in. I want to cover each of these in a little bit more detail so you guys understand what we're talking about that. Let's start off with feedback and behavior. What are we talking about that? So I went to San Diego many years ago, and while I was there for business, I rented a car at the San Diego airport, and they gave me this thing I had never seen before. It was a Toyota Prius. And this, of course, for those of you that have driven in or seen or own a Prius, I owned one for quite a while. This is the little heads-up display that you get on the Prius. The first time I'd ever seen it. And you're like, oh, that's kind of cool. But the most important part of this screen that you're looking at right there is this piece right there. Current miles per gallon. How many miles per gallon are you getting? So I did eventually buy my own Prius. And I will tell you that when I was driving, if I was, maybe punching it off of the green light to get going, or I was driving where I was basically using too much gas, man, my miles per gallon just went way down. And my, of course, goal was to get them up as high as I could. And when I was driving on the freeway, I'd kind of gingerly move the gas. And when you broke, it actually did regeneration, so it would charge the battery. So braking was okay, but really had to be careful with your gas in order to make sure that those miles per gallon were as high as possible. In other words, my driving habits were being changed. I was changing because I was getting feedback. I didn't think about when I drive my regular gas car. When you hit the gas, you of course, know that you're going to be flushing a little extra gas down out the door, out the window, into your motor. But you really don't know, right? Information is power. And that's what Prius was doing, Toyota was doing with the Prius, was providing feedback. And so the utilities are now able to and looking forward to, how can we provide feedback to customers? And so you can put in, for example, first understanding how much energy is being used, right? Feedback on your energy. And then also, where are you using it? So you can figure out where those areas are that you can focus your attention. And then as far as informed behavior, once you know where your energy is being used, you can do things like turn certain appliances off. This is a great illustration I found many, many years ago. I was able to dig it up again because it was so perfect. This illustration about vampire power, okay? And vampire power is basically the amount of energy that is being dribbled away from an appliance waiting for you to turn it on. So like your DVR or your DVD player or your television, there's a light on. If there's a light on, that means that it's using power, albeit not that much, and it's waiting for you to pick up the remote control and say, turn on. So there's a little bit of energy that's being used by all of your different appliances that are especially the smart ones, and that is dribbling away your energy to the tune of about 10% of your total power bill. That's not insignificant. So if we can change behavior, like putting a bunch of stuff on a power strip so that you can turn off one switch at nighttime and all the TV and stereo system and everything else turns off, well, those are little bits of energy that can be saved. And then, of course, you can also, in a lot of today's houses, do smart systems, right? A lot of the smart homes that we have today have control all the way down to the individual circuits. So through data feedback in an app that you have, that your lights on the west side of your house, for some reason, man, that's a pretty high circuit of use. And for those of you that even care to geek out at that level, there's opportunity for that. There's even retrofit stuff that I would normally share with you from Snyder Electric that would be available to retrofit your existing house so that you can monitor things if you cared to. But this is about being able to provide feedback and then behavior modification. What about rate response? This one's probably pretty familiar to everybody. The utility companies, like Salt River Project, for example, they have times of use so that when you're using energy at certain times of the day, like in the summertime, prior to 2 p.m., you're only going to be paying 9.28 cents, okay? 9 cents a kilowatt hour. But during on-peak, in other words, the belly of the duck during on-peak, that's when they're going to really penalize you for using energy. That's peak load, right? When all the air conditionings are running in the summer, air conditioning systems are running. So what can we do to manage around that? The other utilities have a similar program, like Tucson Electric Power here in town, and then also Arizona Public Service. Now, and APS, by the way, is my electric utility. So I do talk about that because this is the rate plans that I manage around. Like right now in the wintertime, because we have beautiful weather here in Phoenix in the wintertime. We don't use a lot of energy in the middle of the day. Okay. We're not using our heater. Just walk outside, catch a little sun, and they have a super off peak. And by the way, that super off peak is incentivizing people to use as much energy as you want during that period of time, because we've got extra capacity that we need need to be able to use somewhere. So we need to pick up demand, and that's where that price signal is going to come into play in all of these rate response situations that are developed and implemented by the electric utilities. Now let's look at direct dispatch. Direct dispatch is distributed energy resources. Now we're back to the DERs. What are those? That's going to be maybe your HVAC load, all right? Your HVAC load, which would be your thermostat and controlling how much air conditioning and heating you're using. Your electric vehicle is a distributed energy resource. Water heaters, batteries, battery storage, those are. Your distributed photovoltaic, those are all distributed energy resources, okay? And those distributed energy resources are all critical components of a virtual power plant. Let's start with looking at distributed energy resources, or what we call connected home devices. So a water heater that is connected to the internet is something that can be offset. We could send a signal to that water heater and tell it when to run. Okay, should we run it when energy is in low demand and inexpensive? Or maybe what we need to do is turn it on if we need to soak up some energy. That would be the purpose of all of these distributed energy resources in one way or the other. Electric vehicles, right? The smart thermostat is what controls your air conditioning and heating system. Some heating and cooling systems, air conditioners and heaters, they are directly controllable through remote control. Usually it's the thermostat that is most efficiently controlling those appliances. Optimized roof and solar and advanced inverters, as well as the batteries. So again, these are the distributed energy resources that are really in the marketplace. One other that I don't usually share are pool pumps, right? If you can take a pool pump and not run it during the peak time, which is what I do, my pool pump runs up until, you might have seen my on peak is going to be 4 to 7 in the summertime with APS. So my pool pump runs right up to 4 o'clock, and then it picks up again in the evening, but it does not run during that on peak because the energy is so expensive. I just stay out of that and push as much of my energy consumption out of the on peak area. Now, when we look at the old ways, remember I described the situation for providing more power. When that happened in the past, of course, the old way to do it was to build more power plants, all right? However, we cannot build enough power plants, and that's what you keep hearing on a national level, including from the current administration. That's why they are saying you can't close down that coal-powered plant, because again, we have this challenge of huge demand that is building and building, and yet we've got to make sure we generate enough. But we can't build enough power plants, new ones, okay, fast enough that meet the environmental objectives and without massive financial investment. It's not inexpensive to build a power plant. I think that goes without saying to anybody, and they also take a long time to bring online. So it really is an all the above solution. We can't not build power plants. We just can't build them enough of them fast enough is really the challenge. And there's a lot of ways that's being looked at, being solved. But today we're going to talk about a really important one as we continue forward, because there is a better way. Okay, it's much faster, meets all the environmental objectives and then some, and it's at a much lower financial investment in order to do that. And that is virtual power plants. Okay, virtual power plants. So now let's talk about what this thing is. What the heck is a virtual power plant? So our standard traditional power plants generate energy, right? And whatever format they're using, nuclear, hydro, burning a fossil fuel, whatever that might be, or it could even be a solar generation or the battery generation, battery storage, any one of those things, but the utility is the one that is taking that energy, creating it, managing it, putting it into the grid. On the other hand, we could take this home in this neighborhood and we could turn it into its own power plant, because these homes would have a heating and cooling system. They are going to have a water heater. They may have an electric vehicle. They may have batteries, and they may have distributed photovoltaic. Those are the mays, okay? They might have those. The bottom line is there are three of these components: the vehicle, the battery, and the PV. All three of those resources can actually put energy back into the grid, two-way energy flows. So those three items can actually put power into the grid when it's needed. So when we have peak demand and we're really struggling to meet peak demand, if we can call on all of the virtual power plants or the virtual distributed energy resources out there and say, hey, we need you to dump power into the grid. All right. That is a signal that is sent. I'll talk about how that happens here in just a moment. To that house and all the others out there to say, hey, put energy back into the grid. Now, virtual power plants, they actually balance electric supply. I talked to you about in this first picture, energy going from the house into the grid instead of maybe the utility company doing it. But the reality is that homes can also soak up power, right? If we have to find a home for that energy during the middle of the day on the duck curve, well, homes can absorb that. We could always run our air conditioning system maybe to pre-cool the house, okay, to soak some of that up. The electric vehicle could be charged in the middle of the day instead of another time when we need it to be a absorber of energy. The water heater could be clicked on. The pool pump could be turned on. We could be charging batteries. Of course, the PV is only one direction, so that one doesn't give us that benefit. But one of the things that I stealing also from Tom Hines, who's a master in this industry, I learned from him so much. He called batteries the Swiss Army knife. And that's, of course, because they're bidirectional, right? They will absorb and they will give energy. That's the beauty of a battery. And by the way, electric vehicles, of course, have batteries. And one thing that I learned over time is that the batteries that we have in our vehicles are way more powerful than the batteries that you might put in your home. And think about it. The energy density, the ability to get as many miles as you can out of that battery in a single charge, and then also making them light. There's a lot more technology that goes into a vehicle's battery than into the battery that you put on the side of your house or in your garage or workshop or wherever you decide to put a battery as part of your energy system that's part of your house. So vehicle batteries are huge opportunities for being able to feed energy back into the grid. Now, there's a lot of logistics that go into that. The utilities have to be prepared to be able to do that. But it's something that's continually being worked on to make sure that we can do that. The charger that your car's plugged into, first off, has to be bidirectional. And a lot of chargers are only unidirectional, giving power to your vehicle. So that's the other thing, is that you got to make sure you got the right charger, which can also take energy out of your vehicle, not just put it in. And that's one of those things that's a logistical issue that's being worked on. But vehicles are a great opportunity for sending energy back into the grid. And again, one of the other things when we talk about demand, I just talked about the homes absorbing energy, but they can also curtail energy use. So you might be able to take some of those distributed energy resources and move them away from the peak sector. So now, instead of maybe absorbing, we can actually use those to reduce demand. This is all virtual. This is all virtual, a signal being sent from a third party to say, hey, we need to make a modification to how your home or your business is using energy right now. And to be clear, on the points that I've raised, VPPs reduce demand during hot or in the wintertime in cold climates, cold outdoor temperatures, through peaks and troughs when bulk power generation is scarce, raising and lowering thermostat set points, okay? Turning off water heaters, shifting the timing of EV charging, using solar and distributed battery power in lieu of grid power. So your home will run off of your battery, or maybe your car, or your solar instead of the grid, because the grid doesn't have the capacity right now to do that. So how that's done is all very balanced. Now, VPPs can also increase demand, right? This is the duck curve. When the duck curve is low, now what we can do is we can pick up demand so that it is more level. Now it is more level by charging distributed batteries when we need to dump energy, shifting the timing of EV charging to charge, as I said, and then turning on water heaters, pool pumps, etc., to absorb energy. So just another way of saying the same thing. Let's talk about the EV one. This is a great illustration, a really great illustration of the power of being able to manage these distributed energy resources. So in California, how to make EVs get along with the grid. Great article from Canary Media. Pacific Gas and Electric. They have their EV Charge Manager program. Okay, you can see where it is in California. It allows PG&E to schedule electric vehicle charging when electricity prices and demand are at their lowest. So that they're using the charging of electric vehicles to kind of decide when that happens in order to make sure that the vehicles are charged, because that's number one. They want to make sure they're still getting charged, but then at a time that makes more sense for the grid. Modulates how EVs power up throughout the day and night in response to how they're actually affecting the local grid. Participants receive insights on their charging habits, but also they get some money. So there's an incentive that goes along with this. $75 to enroll. Some utility companies will give you a monthly credit after the initial enrollment incentive. But most of them are going to be a one-time a year credit on your bill. In this case, for PG&E, $75. This is the power of the PG&E program. What would have happened if everyone started charging when they plugged in? Because that's when people usually charge at nighttime. I have a Tesla charger. And so my Tesla charger, I tell it to charge at 10 o'clock at night. And I think a lot of people probably will charge overnight. I'm also trying to charge after my pool pump turns off in the evening, which is 10. I don't want to be running my pool pump and my car at the same time, charge my car at the same time, even though energy's more is affordable at that time. I still like to tier things out. So I charge my car from 10 o'clock at night till 6 in the morning, and that's what I do. But if everybody does the same as me, well, all the cars will do their charging, and you get this peak in demand from electric vehicles. And one of the challenges that PG&E is talking about is a surge of electric vehicles in California over the next several years. Well, what happens if we take that energy and we basically tell the electric vehicles to spread out? Okay, we're going to spread you out. You only need maybe an hour of charging. So we're going to push you till 3 in the morning, and we'll make sure that you get your 1 hour from 3 to 4. You need a full charge. So we're going to go ahead and let you start early, right at 10. And we'll have you charge up. But what they're doing is they're spreading out that need for energy across the night in the electric vehicles. That's 250 kW of avoided power plant capacity. So we don't need to have a peak plant or even the batteries or whatever. We don't need that, because if you take that load and distribute it across the nighttime, now all of a sudden we've shaved 250 kW off of the peak for PG&E in California. Huge. All right. Now, who operates the VPPs? This is distributed energy resource aggregators. All right. Who are these people? These are actually people that right? They bundle together distributed energy resources, meaning they go out to homeowners and they enroll their thermostats and their PV system and their batteries and their electric vehicles. So they're the ones that go and enroll them in the program. Oftentimes it's the utilities that will do that enrolling, by the way. They will be the ones that enroll people, but then they will work with a partner like Enphase, Sunrun, Tesla, Google, LG. These are all organizations that are distributed energy resource aggregators. Some of them are pretty obvious, like the solar companies. I sell you a solar system and a Powerwall battery system. Well, I'm going to sign you up for my virtual power plant where I've aggregated all of your resources into my program. And what they're basically doing, Energy Hub, Uplight, these are some of the other ones that are out there. And they are all run through a computer system, because you got to imagine the complexity of this management process. There is no person can manage all this. This is 100% computers. In fact, we're dipping into the AI to make it even better and better as we go forward. But effectively, what they're doing is they're taking all the distributed energy resources, and when a electric utility says, "Hey, we got a peak event happening tomorrow. We know the temperatures in Phoenix maybe are going to spike up to 117 tomorrow afternoon. We're going to have huge demand." And then what they'll do is they'll turn to their aggregator partner, like usually Energy Hub, or any one of these, and they'll say, "Hey, we need you to take all of the people that you've signed up, that we've given you to sign up in this our virtual power plant, and we basically need to modify, send a signal out to their equipment to do something." Okay. In the summer, it would be make sure that we're turning thermostats up a couple of degrees during that period of time. Now, I want to make it clear because the utilities want me to make this clear to you. These are voluntary programs. Even if you're enrolled in these programs, if for some reason, when they say we're gonna set your thermostat up a couple of degrees during the middle of the afternoon, you have the option to opt out. That's important for you to know. These are all opt-out programs. Now, they're hoping that you're not going to opt out every time. And of course, in the middle of the day, although this is a historical artifact as well, most people are not working at home during the middle of the day. And so if you're not working at home, what do you care if the thermostat is turned up a couple of degrees? Your dog and your cat might be a little bit disturbed and frustrated, but you're not there. So for that to happen for you in the middle of the day is not unreasonable. And by and large, they're going to have a lot of people that are not going to worry about that extra 2 degrees or 3 degree setup of the thermostats just during that peak time. But if the aggregators in partnership with utilities can say, send a signal out to these distributed energy resources to do something, either turn on, turn off, whatever, that's huge. That is the virtual power plant. The ability for us to virtually modify demand and supply so that we don't have to have power plants doing that. Okay, now I'm going to get into that cost effectiveness thing, okay? DER, VPP, and energy efficiency are more cost effective than building power plants. Let me use that electric vehicle PG&E example because there was research on this, all right? The EV charging optimization, if we just do the optimization just for the EV program in California, the one that I showed you the graph on, it's predicted to save 27 to 42% in infrastructure upgrades. That's power plants, but it's also power lines and other things, but it's mostly power plants. In order to accommodate 13.5 million EVs that are coming onto the market by 2035 in California, all right? So they did some analysis on this. So the forecasted cost to upgrade the distribution grid with power plants and power lines, $22.7 billion by 2035. If they do the managed EV charging program at the utility level, okay, so the utility is tweaking things. You can actually go all the way down to the feeder level where you're being even more detailed, more fine tuning. But let's not go that far. Let's just talk about managing EVs at the utility level where they're generating the power. You're talking about a 6.1 billion with a B billion dollar savings. That's the 27%. I just want to deal with that little figure right there because things just get better. If we talk about managing things at the feeder level and as we look out to 2040 in this analysis. Let's just look at the 6.1 and put the cost effectiveness into perspective. If the managed EV charging, if the EV charging and optimized at the utility level, again, the smallest opportunity, the $6.1 billion over 10 years, I'm going to dive into a little math here. So you got to wake up now and pay attention because this is the hardest part of what I'll describe. I'm a little in the weeds now, but hang with me here. The point's a good one, okay? So $610 million per year is what the utility is effectively going to save, all right? Now, if they're paying incentives to the EV owners, remember there's 13.5 million of them. They're not all coming on at day one. Over time, they're talking about this, but there's 13.5 million EV users. Assume that 75% of those EV users participate. That's a fairly high number, but assume 75 participate. 55% of the homes have two EVs, which means that you're only going to have one home at a time participating. So you do the math, that works out to only 5.1 million homes for our example here. And you're going to get $75 per home for your EV charging credit. That incentive is going to cost the utility $380 million a year. That's not a small number. $380 million a year. However, what the utility is actually saving is $230 million a year because they didn't have to build the power plants and the infrastructure to manage that. That's $230 million that the utility company can avoid that cost, and they can even use that as maybe reduced rates back to the customers, maybe incentives of another kind. But that's the opportunity when we talk about savings. And by the way, that's just the EV managed program in California for one utility company. Imagine all the other things that are opportunities that we've at least touched on today. This is a great example talking about the cost. The VPP could provide the same resource adequacy at a significant cost reduction. If you just look at the net cost of gas battery, which is a good one, and VPP, I mean, there's just no question. The cost to run a VPP program is incredibly low. And if you as a utility company could spend your money that way and get the same effective benefit, of course you would do that. And your stockholders for the publics would demand that. and the privates, of course, would also be looking at that, or the quasi governmental, they would look at that as well. Again, that's the major opportunity. And let's just look at two headlines from last year. This was virtual power plants help save the grid during the heat dome. And the small fine text talked about in the East Coast on June 23rd, the Eastern U.S. grid largely weathered the challenge of the peaks that they had in the summertime because of their virtual power plant opportunities, okay, that are in place. What about California? Looking back at California, their virtual power plant could save, these again, they're ramping these things up, $206 million by 2028 as they continue to ramp up more and more in the virtual power plants. And just looking at the current example from this past summer on July 29th, they discharged, meaning they told the batteries that are in the virtual power plant to discharge 100,000 of them. They discharged 539 megawatts into the grid, saving between 28 and $206 million over time. Okay. So that's the power of the virtual power plant as an important part of the energy mix. Let's talk about energy efficiency a little bit here. Why does the Environmental Protection Agency care about energy efficiency? I often get that question. Aren't they the Environmental Protection Agency? What are they doing messing around with energy efficiency? Well, there's a really logical reason there. Power plants are polluters, right? Certainly back when Energy Star was created in the early 1990s, a lot of the power plants, most of them were fossil fuel burning. So the EPA realized that they could indirectly reduce pollution if they could reduce the amount of time that a power plant runs or the number of them running by not having to build as many. So if we could reduce demand by building energy efficient products, homes, buildings, appliances, light bulbs, anything that they label, if we could do that, we could indirectly reduce pollution, okay? We could reduce pollution. And the other thing too, they realized that few power plants running less often is not only saving pollution, but the incentives to builders are way less expensive, okay, than building more power plants. So again, we're talking about where's the biggest bang for the buck? Where can we spend our dollars and get the most mileage? Energy efficiency. And again, you guys are, I'm sure, the choir when it comes to everything I'm saying here, because you already believe in the things that I'm sharing with you. But again, this is just evidence of that entire way of thinking. Now, the role of energy efficiency in virtual power plants is actually not maybe as obvious to some people, but let's see if we can make it a little bit more obvious. First of all, it allows homes to maintain comfort during extreme weather and therefore to better participate when a thermostat is increased or decreased, okay, in summer or winter. So in cold climates, the virtual power plant may want to turn the thermostat down in the middle of the night when it's super cold. And of course, in places like Phoenix, where I am, they're going to want to raise the thermostat in the middle of the summer so that air conditioning system is not causing as much demand. All right. But when you're raising and lowering thermostats, we're impacting the ability of that home to stay, or business to stay warm or cool, right? And so the envelope, and by the way, this is my old house. I have block construction, it's masonry, and I have zero insulation in my walls. All right. That's a little research I was doing on my own house, and I cut the drywall out just to confirm what I already knew. I had no insulation in my walls. So my walls are basically stone. That's it. I have no insulation. And so in the middle of the summertime, I get a fair amount of heat that moves through my uninsulated walls into my building. The block is a good thermal sink, right? And thermal mass. I get benefits out of that. That's why block homes are not the worst possible solution there. But nonetheless, I get a fair amount of heat flowing through my walls. Okay. And then my air conditioning system needs to take that heat and throw it outside. That's what air conditioning does. It takes the heat inside and throws it outside, keeping my house cool. Now, if I were to insulate my house, okay, for example, what if I took, which is common in old homes that are masonry in at least Phoenix, we'll wrap our buildings in foam, right? And then we'll put stucco over the top of that. If I wrap my building in foam, well, now I've reduced the amount of heat gain coming into my house. All right. Now imagine what that's going to do for me when I participate in a program where pre-cooling is going on. So what happens, and I do this on my home, my thermostat, my programmable thermostat will turn down to 75 degrees from 77. I keep it at 77. I'll turn it down to 70. I'll turn it down to 75 degrees, and my house will pre-cool down to 75 degrees right up until on peak, right up to 4 o'clock. And then my house will cruise. So it's cruising. Now it's going to go up to, I set it up to 79 degrees. Okay. I set it up to 79. So now I've got this 4-degree increase that I can do, and my house will maintain at that temperature. Okay. And it increases over time. Well, there are some super energy efficient houses being built or have been built over the last several years. Most Energy Star homes, those are really well insulated. So am I going to have any concern? Now, my house is just fine, and I got no insulation in the walls. What if I insulated? My house would ride across that setup in my thermostat. I wouldn't even blink. I wouldn't even know. And most homes that are really well built, energy efficient, they're going to be just fine. The customer, importantly, is not going to be complaining. They're not going to be overriding, I don't want to participate. They'll probably go, all right, let's see how this goes when they first do it. Man, you turn my thermostat, I didn't even know it. Okay. Sometimes only once have I had to adjust my thermostat. I think it was on a really, really hot day. Well, my house also has no insulation in the walls. But again, a really good house, they're not even going to flinch. Now take this into the winter environment. Again, a really well insulated house is going to be able, because it's energy efficient, it's going to be able to ride that out much better. What about putting ducts inside conditioned space? Another important energy efficiency opportunity that I have a whole class about on getting ducts in conditioned space. And so if we were to cathedralize our insulation at the roof deck, and then we had all this happy duct work in the summertime, when the air conditioner did come on during the on peak, because it will run, mine runs, but if all my ducts were inside conditioned space, well, then the air that's being run through those ducts would not be in a hot attic picking up heat. And that means it would be delivered cooler, and my house would ride across that thermostat set point much, much more efficiently. See? And then connected devices. Those ultimately save energy because they can participate. Now we're talking about the energy efficient devices like programmable thermostats, high efficiency air source heat pumps, okay, heat pump water heaters, all of these things. Are things that you in the energy efficiency world might be just used to because they save energy. But when they're smart and they are connected to the internet, now they can participate in the virtual power plants. But if they're not smart, then they're not able to be enrolled in these virtual power plant programs. And that's what is important, is that we include these items in there. Now let's look at these programs that are fairly popular, like Next Gen from the EPA Energy Star program. And let's look at what they're doing. First of all, the key features are high efficient construction, connected multi-stage Energy Star certified heat pumps, Energy Star certified connected heat pump water heaters. These are requirements of the program, but connected is the key. Electric cooktop and oven, electric vehicle charging, and those also are going to be things that can be enrolled in a virtual power plant. Notice that the next gen program, you guys might be wondering, why do they keep wanting things to be connected, right? I mean, what's the point of that? Some of you guys probably are very clear on that, but some of us might have been scratching our head. Well, why are they doing that? That's so they can be a part of the virtual power plant. What about the code? The ICC 2024 has the energy efficiency packages. The 21 code had 5 of them in there. Okay, 5 packages in the, this is again the packages that are required for the prescriptive path compliance. And so 5 were in the 2021 code, but they added a number of other packages, a lot more, in the 24 code. Again, I talk about all of this in my codes class. So if you want to dive deeper into this, that's an opportunity for you. But I'm paying attention to this package that they tucked in to the 24 code called demand response. And this is something that you can do as a compliance option. And it's a wired or wireless bi-directional communication thermostat that allows voluntary participation in a utility provided demand response program. So the codes recognize this, the importance of this. And by the way, thermostats and being able to control heating and cooling equipment is absolutely one of the easiest ways to do the distributed energy resource and management. This is one of those very easy ways to do this, okay? And so putting it into the code as, hey, if you put in a smart thermostat, you're going to get credit for that in the code as one of the packages. So the codes are including it. What about benefits of the distributed energy resources and virtual power plants for builders? First of all, if you're building a home that's got the things that we've talked about for distributed energy resources, that's going to be something that you should talk about as part of increasing your brand value. You're going to be staying ahead of the codes because the codes are right now making some of this stuff voluntary. Eventually, it's going to be something that's required as we march forward with greater and greater efficiency built into the energy codes. So through 2024, you know, if you already had a smart thermostat as part of your offering as a builder, well, heck, you can check that box off as meeting that piece of the code without even batting an eye there. That one's easy. More valuable product. Your home's going to be more valuable with all these distributed energy resources, right? Just because they're all great products. You know, having the electric vehicle charging infrastructure, you're not going to be providing the electric vehicle, obviously, but all the other things to be included or at least be capable. If you've got PV ready, then that's obviously going to make your home more valuable. In fact, I think it's really key by future-proofing your house. If the direction we're heading is virtual power plants, if the direction we're heading is more and more and more homes having their own generation through PV, then any distributed energy resource that you are putting into your house is future-proofing your house for the future. EV ready, I mean, we know that EVs have taken a hit last year, although we had a record last year as people rushed to take advantage of the tax credit before it went away. There's going to be a dip this year in EV purchases and sales. There's going to be a hit. But again, the horse has left the barn. Electric vehicles are here to stay. We just may not see the inclines as much as we've seen in the future, but that's where we're going into the future. So for you to build a home that doesn't at least have an outlet so somebody could put a charger in there, I mean, come on. It's so cheap for it to be as part of that initial home being bought compared to, you know, it cost me to put my charger in my house. I had to have an electrician. I had to rewire everything and get the outlet over there, then put the charger on. It's over $2,000 to do that. And so for you to put a plug that I could have just plugged my vehicle in with a charger that comes with my car, you know, it's not as cool as a wall charger, which eventually I can do, but I don't have to have it. I can still charge at home. All you gave me was a 220 outlet, right? That's all I needed. And so that's future-proofing homes. This is a cool thing. Virtual upgrades pushed out through the internet. I have a Tesla vehicle, and my Tesla vehicle had a recall. Not good, right? You get that notice in the mail. Your car has a recall notice. Something needs to be fixed. Okay. And so they say, in the notice, you got to go down to the dealership. You got to do all this stuff. Well, for my vehicle, I got the notice in the mail. It was my notification. And they said, by the way, tomorrow night, we're going to push out that upgrade and fix to your car while you're sleeping. In the morning, when you wake up, it'll all be done for you. I'm like, whoa. So that's the beauty. My car and Tesla, for example, they've continued to get more and more mileage out of their vehicles, all because of the algorithms and how they will integrate and do the braking and the charging and all of those things. That's all just computers. And so I drive basically a battery. I drive an electric motor, a steering wheel, and 4 tires. That's what I drive. Okay, that's it. There's not much more complication there. Now, I do drive a computer, so there is vulnerabilities there. I get that. But everything is so good so far. And my upgrade for my recall notice was a push out. That means that there's an opportunity for all these distributed energy resources to likewise be upgraded. If you could push out an upgrade to a water heater so it's even more efficient, or to a battery, or to anything that is attached, that's just more powerful and upgrades as they go forward. So there is potential for builders, by the way, that there could be an opportunity for the utilities to partner with you. This is just talk. Okay, no utilities are promising anything, but there is an opportunity for you to actually enroll your home buyers in the virtual power plants and the programs that the utilities are running. If you do that, there's an ongoing revenue opportunity that you could tap into as a builder. Just saying, it's out there. Not that I've seen anybody do that just yet, but as a builder, there's an opportunity for you to enroll your home buyer in the program and maybe create some type of a profit center. Now, incentives for the VPP participants. I'm just going to give you one example. There are lots and lots of examples. And I'm going to only give you one, APS, which is, again, my electric utility. I participate in their storage rewards battery virtual power plant program. So that just started this summer. All right, it just started this summer. It's bring your own device. So I had my system installed, and then I waited and waited and waited. And then this summer, at the end of the summer, they finally said, it's launched. Our virtual power plant is ready to roll. Would you like to sign up? And I was like, I'm in. So I signed up. It's $110 per average KW distributed for the year. So they'll take all of the events where your battery has put energy into the grid, and they will take the amount of energy you put into the grid during that event, and they will average your input to the grid across all the events for the year from May to October. They will average what you put into the grid during all those events, and then they will pay you $110 per average KW, okay? They also have their smart charge program, which I also am enrolled in, okay? So this is basically just like the power shift program that I told you about in California. It's the same thing. And by the way, if you're in Phoenix, SRP and APS both have smart charge programs. Tucson Electric Power, they also have a smart charge program. But these programs basically pay an enrollment fee. I get $5 per month. And then when I'm plugged in, they will take they will be able to charge or not charge my electric vehicle. They're not taking power out of my vehicle. They're just moving when I charge. So maybe I will tell you in the summertime, when I start charging, I have my app running. So it will start at 10 p.m. Remember, what it will do is my car is supposed to start charging at 10. I've noticed that it didn't start charging until like 1 in the morning. Now I got the charge I needed, but they didn't start my car until 1 in the morning because all the EVs that they don't have enrolled, well, they're all turning on. All the ones that they do have enrolled is an opportunity to push those out a little so that their peak is shaved off, just like the example from California. That's what they're doing with a smart charge program. Now, I'm going to tell you this. In my PV a case study class that I'm going to tell you about in a minute, I'm going to tell you how these two programs can also fight with each other. So there's some lessons I've learned. One was a bit of an expensive one, not horribly expensive, but more. It cost me a little bit of money because these two programs they have to work together. And so you got to be kind of on the ball on these things as a homeowner, or else the programs can compete with each other and maybe you don't maximize your opportunities. I'm going to save that for the case study class that I'm going to be doing with Green Builder Media in May. I'll tell you about that here in a moment. So here's my system that I installed last year in the beginning of the summer. It came online in June of last year. Okay. Now I enrolled in the virtual power plant program, and they max out at $400. So that's the max that they talk about in there. There's $110. So I enrolled in the app. This is basically the same app that you use for your Tesla vehicle, right? So it's the Tesla app. So I have my car in the app, and I also have my power walls. I kind of move fast here. I have a very big array in the back. It's a 14.7 kW array. Plenty of energy, but there's a whole reason. I'll explain why I did that in the other class. And then here's my electric panel upgrade. And then I have 2 power walls that are operating for my part of my system. Again, I'll dive into more detail in the other class on that one. Very, very good. So I got this notice on my app that, hey, virtual power plant, do you want to enroll? I'm like, yeah, I was waiting for it to come. So then I got a notice once I was enrolled that said, hey, there's going to be an event that's starting at 7 p.m. at the end of on peak. Okay. At 7 p.m., we're going to be running the virtual power plant tonight. And you notice that I could opt out. That's important. I remember I told you that. Well, I don't want to opt out. I see how this all worked. And by the way, it worked just fine, but you could opt out. And that's the other thing, is keep that in mind. So here's how my thing worked. I even got a little animation going here for you guys. So here was my virtual power plant, my batteries doing something that it had never done before, which was pushing energy out to the grid. It normally will feed the house, and that's all my batteries normally do. But on a virtual power plant event, it was pushing energy out into the grid, and you could see that I was putting 8.7 kW out to the grid at that time. And so this is what happened. This is, again, I'm geeking out a little, so hang in there with me, folks. This is what happened in the app. I can watch what's happening. This is watching my battery. So my battery was fully charged. And then what happened at 7 p.m. is I started feeding energy out to the grid, okay? And look what they did. They said, we're going to run from 7 to 9. That's what they said. My battery is set so it will go no less than 20%. So it will not go any less than 20%. So I always have a reserve for emergency purposes. And by the way, I can with my Powerwall, I can set whatever I want that to be. I set it at 20%. So the APS during this event, what they did is they basically took all of my battery, or 80% I had, and they put it all out into the grid across that 2 hours. So they maximized my battery distribution out to the grid. No problem. And by the way, this is never anything I see. My solar panels will feed the grid. That's yellow. But I've never had my grid being fed by my battery, except this one virtual power plant event where they were taking stuff from my battery and putting it out into the grid. Okay. And so you could see how much that day did I give into the grid. I put out to the grid from my PV system 34 kW. I fed 15 kW into the grid at nighttime during this event. My home did 9.9 kW was the average that it was done. This is what it said I contributed. There were 390 homes as of this event back in October. And 2.6 megawatts of energy was put by those 390 participants, me being one of them, of course. And then basically I could have been paid $1,089. The max reward is actually $400, as I told you. So this is me participating in the virtual power plant. Here's the class. I'm doing this with Green Builder on May 20th. It'll be the same time, 2 o'clock Eastern time. And we're going to be talking about my entire installation, the case study. I also am going to be comparing this to the installation of my brother's system. My brother had his system installed as well at the same time as mine, actually faster than mine, and I can explain all that. But he did a traditional rooftop. Mine, as you saw, was ground mounted, very rare. But walk you through from cradle to grave, from contract, from inspection to contract to fire up and operational. Okay, process for contract, if I got all that. System operation and performance. I'm going to talk about that little battle I had between my EV charging and my virtual power plant, distributed energy resource stuff. I'll explain that. My experience of participating in those programs. So, would love to have you guys join me for that class. That one will be on May 20th. I'm very excited to share that with everybody. It's the next level of conversation around all of the things that we've talked about today. So we have covered a lot. Mike, I didn't quite hit my mark. I was pretty close there, and I apologize to everybody for going a little long. I even cut some content out to try and fit it in. I just get too excited, I guess, about all this stuff. But we've covered a lot today, starting with where does this come from, to managing the duct curve, understanding the demand response approaches that are taken by the utility companies. We talked about the more cost-effective nature of VPP. We talked about the energy efficiency role in virtual power plants, distributed energy resource programs, how they're integrated into programs like NextGen and into the codes. We talked about the incentives for builders as well as the incentives for homeowners. And so I did mention, and I wanted to at least give you guys a plug for my high performance home masterclass session that's starting next week. These are all the classes that make up my core program that talk about building science and unvented attics and the codes, as well as the energy programs and products. These are all part of my regular offering that I do throughout the year. And anybody that signs up for this, if you can't make all the dates, you can, at no additional cost, you get to go to the additional sessions to make up any classes that you missed. My goal is to get you through all 6 classes and also to get you high performance home math certification. That comes along with the 6 classes. And again, I've got a lot of other classes that I teach and make available at Learning Edge. If you go to my website, learningedgellc.com, or with your camera, real quick, hit the QR code. That'll take you right to my website where all these classes are complimentary, no cost for any of these classes for you to take and enjoy those classes and learn. I want to thank Green Builder Media for hosting me today, and also for Salt River Project for their sponsorship for me to speak today. Now is the time for you guys, before we take questions, and this is the last thing I'm doing, is get out your phones, shoot the QR code, and you will be able to take the feedback survey, which is simple. All you got to do is give me a 1 through 10. That's it. If you don't mind, you could. You don't have to, but give me a little positive. What'd you like about today's class? And then if I could do something better, maybe make it shorter, whatever, please provide that feedback as well. When you're all done, you will be able to download a copy of all the slides that you saw today. And Mary should have, I believe, put into the chat the link where you guys can click and go do the feedback survey while Mike and I address any questions that come in. So, Mike, I'm done. Thanks for your patience while I muscled my way through all that.
No, no problem at all. We do have some questions from the audience. I had a couple myself, so we'll get through those. And for those who haven't submitted questions yet, please do so via the Q&A function of Zoom. So our first question comes from Rosalie. She wanted to know your opinion on the MIT solution for energy storage battery stores in concrete pads. And I don't know if you're familiar with this or not. She goes on to explain what they are. So I'll first ask if you're familiar with what these are.
I'm not, but I am familiar that I am aware, better put it that way. I am aware that there are a lot of storage opportunities. For example, solar thermal plants, which APS happens to be a part of one, they take molten salt solution and they warm it up, and then they put it into an underground tank so that they can use that molten solution at nighttime to generate energy when the sun goes down on their in that facility. And there are lots of ones. There's even ones I've seen write-ups, Mike, about underground caverns where they're doing thermal storage is that way. So I haven't heard of the specific one that she's referring to, but I'm sure it's along those lines. Mike, when it comes to that. So I don't know, Mike, if you wanted to weigh in on any of that, you might be more familiar than me.
Well, I'll read what she had sent in because it does sound very interesting. Apparently, they have developed an electron conducting carbon concrete, which is a multifunctional material that acts as a supercapacitor. It uses cement, water, and carbon black to create a conductive nanonetwork. But the cool thing about it, from my perspective, is it allows things like walls, roads, and foundations to store and release electricity, which could power off-grid homes. It could charge EVs. And apparently, they've made some improvements that increase its capacity tenfold. Now, tenfold over what? I don't know. But I find this interesting because living here in the Midwest, most people here have basements, and those basements are made out of concrete walls. So to be able to have something like this at basically every residence would be quite interesting.
Yep. In fact, Mike, who was it that asked that question again?
That was from Rosalie.
Rosalie. Rosalie, would you send me an email with some information on that if you don't mind? I always am studying and learning about new things. I had not heard of that. It sounds fascinating. If you don't mind, if you'd send me an email, Darren at learningedgellc.com, Darren at learningedgellc.com. Send me an email if you don't mind. I'd love to get some more information on that.
Yeah, yeah. We have another question from Robert, and Robert, his question is a little bit from the skeptical side of things. He wants to know what's going to prevent the utility from fraudulently managing his use to improve their profits. They kick in and say, "Well, you're going to charge your EV during the most costly time."
Yeah.
So, can you address that element?
Yeah. First of all, the skepticism is 100% understandable, right? There's a ton of big brother that people worry about when we're talking about somebody else managing your thermostat. I mean, or my EV charging. Are you crazy? There's going to be plenty of people that won't touch that with a 10-foot pole, Mike. You and I both know that.
Yeah.
The truth is that in my system, there are guardrails, first of all, on when things are happening. I am always told in advance of when an event is happening, so that I know that it's coming. That's part of the trust, because that's what the question is about, trust. And so the utilities are trying to do as much as they can to make sure that there's no hidden surprises, there's no gotchas, there's no any of that. And that all comes from giving you plenty of notice of when it's going to happen, giving you the complete freedom to go and take your thermostat and crank it back down again if you prefer, or opt out of the virtual power plant with a button on my phone, or any of the EV charging stuff. I will tell you that these programs are best if you're not doing a set it and forget it, especially if you're doing multiple programs, because I'm actually participating in 3 programs with APS: their thermostat program, their EV program, and their virtual power plant program. So I've got to keep my eye on all 3 of these programs. If that's overwhelming to you, then pick the one that gives you the most benefit. It might be just the thermostat program. Pretty simple. You know when it's going to happen. They're going to set your thermostat up. The worst you could do is maybe get hot during the summer or cold in the wintertime, but not if you've built your house correctly, as I pointed out. But you have control over this. And so could they do that? Well, that would be one thing that I bet plenty of people would jump all over if all of a sudden the utilities were doing any kind of monkey business with this. Man, that hit the front page. What would that do to their participation in the program? Man, that'd dry it up so fast. It would be a complete loss to them. So they have a huge reason to maintain, first get, and then maintain trust that they're going to do run this program in a way that is beneficial for everybody. But last thing, Mike, on that comment is to say, well, they are running this program so that they can run energy more efficiently, right? So they are turning the thermostat up in the middle of the day, which makes your house a little warmer in the summer, so that they can reduce the peak load, so they don't have to build another power plant. That's selfish. I get it. But it ultimately does keep their costs down, which do get passed on to people. And if you're in Arizona, the Arizona Corporation Commission, for example, they pay very close attention to what the utilities are doing, their rates, their programs like virtual power plant, which, by the way, the ACC loves. They love the virtual power plant program that the utilities are all participating in. They really like that. And so they're keeping an eye on that as well. Beyond those words, Mike, I don't know what more I can share.
Well, I think, you point out a good point, which is it's a two-way street. You're trying to get benefits for the ratepayers, but also for the energy provider at the same time. So it's not just one or the other. It's got to be a benefit for all. So.
Win-win.
So I had a couple questions, and
Please.
obviously those who have been attending here obviously know Darren does not work for Ford. But I'm going to ask a question going back to the battery manufacturing section of your presentation. Do you think that their production is going to drop due to the discontinuation of the Ford Lightning and potentially other EVs, or do you see them getting out of the battery business altogether?
No, I don't. Ford discontinued the Ford Lightning truck, but if you looked at that press release and some of the things around it, Ford still has a full line of electric vehicles. It's the truck that wasn't profitable anymore to them. So they still need batteries for their vehicles. And Mike, I'm not a crystal ball person, but I spend a whole lot of time in this industry like you do. And I will tell you that my sense is that a lot of what's going on right now is a pause or a slow, but not a stop. And so if they've invested, which they have, because they've already committed all the dollars to build these infrastructure like battery manufacturing, they're going to, of course, want to make sure they have buyers for that product. But if it's not for themselves, the utilities are continuing to want batteries, need batteries for their purposes. And a lot of these manufacturers, they're not building just batteries, of course, for their vehicles, but it's also these grid sized or grid level battery systems that the utilities are going to need, that others are going to need. By the way, data centers are buying their own and setting up their own battery facilities. The data centers, because one, that's pretty cheap for them to do. And they can then take all the cheap energy and charge up the batteries so they can then use that energy during on peak. By the way, in California, the utilities are actively working with the data centers to do this. They're helping them, they're consulting with them. How can you put a battery? We're not going to pay for it, but we can't get you power fast enough. So why don't we help you to build a battery facility on your property for your data center so that we can win-win together. We'll still get you energy and you can buy it from us cheap, put it into your own batteries for your own purposes. And the data centers are absolutely jumping on that. So I don't see at all a slowdown in battery manufacturing, Mike. For those reasons, even if the EVs slow down for a company like Ford, because they have plenty of buyers for their batteries in different forms.
Okay. And speaking of batteries, and California too, Peter asked the question if you knew of any bi-directional EV chargers that might be available, especially in California.
Yeah, I have not researched that, so I apologize that I can't give you a ready answer on that one. However, I'm sure that a little bit of research on Google, our friend, is going to give you an answer of where you can buy bi-directional chargers. They're out there, third party. I honestly don't know if Tesla's is bi-directional. I have a Tesla wall charger. I don't know if it's bi-directional. I never really paid attention to that because it wasn't an option until very recently. But Tesla is running virtual power plants in California. They have a couple of they have two versions of a virtual power plant they're running in California with their Powerwall customers. Now, that's the battery, and batteries can, without a bidirectional car charger, do that. I would be very surprised if Tesla's wall charger is not bidirectional now, as the need for being able to use car batteries, especially Tesla car batteries, is an opportunity. So I don't have a good answer. That's a long answer to say I don't have a good answer, but I think a search would get somebody get the answer to that.
Well, your answer did spur a question in my own mind, which is again speaking to your experience with a Tesla Powerwall.
Mhm.
Um, the the ability for it to be bi-directional, is that
Yes.
is that a hardware situation or is that a
Yes.
software situation?
Well, it's both. It's both, but
Okay.
it's a hardware especially situation.
Yeah.
See,
Okay.
Tesla Powerwalls are pretty special because they have the inverters built right into the batteries. So my solar array does not have inverters on it. Because all the inverter happen because my energy comes through my power walls. So if I've showed you the picture of my power walls, you'd see the power coming in on the right side, and then it goes through the batteries, and then it goes to the my panel. And I walked through this in my other class, how that thing all set up. Um, but the inverters, which turn DC direct current into alternating current, that happens inside of the Tesla Powerwalls. So being able to though, and there's additional hardware and the software capabilities that are all built into the Powerwall that facilitates all that. All of my virtual power plant enrollment was through my power walls. Okay. That was through the power walls. My Tesla system is already set up to be a part of a virtual power plant. And APS said, hey, we're ready to enroll your system. And they'd already worked out the software and the hardware and everything with Tesla so that then I could enroll and it would go right in. So it's both, but it's going to be that hardware issue, but the software, of course,
Okay.
has to do its part as well, Mike.
Okay. Yeah, you had talked about the software, pushing out the software and that earlier, so I just didn't know. Final call for questions from our audience. I have one last one myself. You had that fun slide about vampire power, and I was wanting to ask the question. There's a sneaky vampire power load in homes that wasn't listed on there,
Oh,
and so I'm curious if you know. Because I don't know. I'm curious if you know how much power does the garage door opener pull?
uh, great question. The garage door opener is an appliance waiting for a signal. So I really couldn't tell you. Those are such small dribbles
Okay.
that I wouldn't even be able to tell you. As it is
Okay.
now, with my Tesla app running the Tesla system with the Powerwall and the solar panels, I really have a very good idea of what my power consumption is. At any moment, I can open my app and I can see what my power consumption is. So I've done things, Mike, like turn on my pool pump to see what happens to my power consumption. And I've started the charging in my vehicle. So I can again, I'm a geek about this stuff, right? So I can see, well, how much power is my pool pump drawing? How much power does my oven run? And it's so cool because I can again watch it, turn it on, and then just see what happens. And it'll tell me what my power draw is. I don't have that minutia of window into things like I doubt, Mike, if I turn my power my garage door opener on and off, which I don't have one, but if I turned it on, I doubt I would be able to see that fine little dribble going on there. So I'm sorry I don't have an answer for you on that one, but it would be interesting to know, and maybe that one needs to be added into that list.
I was just testing your geekiness. That's all.
I don't geek out maybe that hard. So great one. If I would answer that, man, that'd put me in a whole nother league of geeky stuff. That's for sure.
Well, I think, in your defense, that's something that you're just not going to. It would be very difficult to manage that power.
Yes.
It's a small drip, like you said, but it's also hard to manage. It's easy if you say, okay, and we do this in our own home. We put our televisions on surge strips and just kill the power to the whole thing for
Right.
most of the time because we don't watch TV
Right.
very much. That's easy.
That's right.
Garage door opener, that's a pain in the
Yeah,
butt.
the hardwired stuff is really that you really can't do anything about the hardwired. Although that electric panel that I showed you,
Yeah.
with all the each circuit is being monitored, and that's an expensive panel, by the way. That panel is not inexpensive, but that panel you can turn circuits on and off on with your phone. That's some serious control to be able to turn with your phone, turn all these circuits off. That you could do it. I don't know that the savings benefit from that kind of a thing, Mike, would ever pay itself back. I don't know that it would ever pay itself back.
Yeah.
But you could control down to that level. You could. But
Yeah.
I like the idea of a power strip on everything in the living room that's on your AV system. That's simple. We can all do that one.
Yeah. Yeah. That's low tech.
Low tech.
Well, I don't see any other questions, so I want to thank you, Darren, for spending your time with us today. Very much appreciated. Thank you also to our audience and to not just for asking questions, but for being here with us. We really do appreciate it. Thank you also to PowerShift by NV Energy for their generous sponsorship. Our next webinar is going to take place 2 weeks from today. That's January 28th at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. We'll be discussing how to sell healthier homes. We're going to have Matt Power, Todd Usher, and Russell Pope with us for that. For more information and to register, please go to www.greenbuildermedia.com. Thanks again, everyone, for joining us today, and I hope to see you in 2 weeks. Until then, stay safe, stay healthy, and take care, everyone. So long.